There's something so fun about loot drops in games. I just love the shimmering beam of light letting you know you're about to get something interesting. So I was thinking, what if there was a really cute farming game, but all of the crops are loot drops? I was curious what this would be like, so I decided to try to make it myself. So this is my journey of creating a loot drop based farming game in Godot and everything I learned along the way. The idea I had for the gameplay loop was pretty simple. My plan is to just have a plot of land where the player can plant seeds, water them, and then the plants will grow and pop out into these loot drop-like plants with different rarities and different sell values, and then you can collect those plants, carry them over to somewhere to sell them, get money, and then use that money to buy upgrades for your tools and farm, and maybe you just win the game when you get all the upgrades or something like that. I want this to be kind of arcadey and fast-paced, so the plants are really quickly growing. I'm thinking of going for an art style inspired by Link's Awakening and Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, where the characters are kind of like toy-like, and you also have a kind of tilt shift shader going on to make things look more just like a fun, playful toy environment. Start out, I should just make a really simple environment with a basic character, and then we'll get to some 3D modeling and just setting up the environment, I guess. So I spent some time setting up a simple player moving around the scene and a camera with an almost top-down perspective, kind of like Link's Awakening. It's probably a fine starting point. Then I started thinking about how the plots of dirt where you'd plant your seeds would work, and I mocked one up in Godot. So now I modeled an actual dirt plot in Blender, and here I thought about how I'd actually want to do the texturing for all of my models in the game. I decided to use a method I'd seen before for low poly models, where you can kind of just scale the UVs along a gradient image texture to apply nice colors to your models very quickly. And you can just share the same small image texture for every single model in your game very easily. I decided to go for a pretty shiny look to kind of capture a toy-like texture. Then I brought the dirt plot model into Godot and made it its own scene. I mean, I guess this is a fine starting point, right? I decided to do some more 3D modeling, and I knew that I wanted 3 different growth stages for my plant. Seed stage, sapling stage where there's some like green, and then the full crop. So I decided to try to make the seeds model first. I don't know, it's a start. Then I tried to make the sapling. I'm still quite new to 3D modeling and learning as I go, so everything's a little bit more of a struggle than it needs to be. It's like an alien or something. But I eventually got a pretty good looking result for the sapling. I mean, that actually looks pretty good, right? Then I brought all these models into Godot, and at this point I still wasn't quite sure how to make them all share the same texture, so that wasn't quite working, but they were all in the game. At this point I was feeling like I needed to change the seed model a bit because it was a little bit too close to resembling hot dogs. I think the seeds could use some improvement. But I decided to take a break and come back the next day. I fixed up the seeds a bit to make them look a little bit less hot dog-like. I figured out how to manually assign a shared material to my imported models. If I change this, it should change all of them. But I realized this would be easier if I just had an automatic way to do this. So I ended up writing a post-import script that would automatically assign any imported meshes the new shared material to speed up this pipeline. Okay, that's cool. Then I set out to model my first crop, a strawberry. One interesting thing here with the modeling is that I had to keep in mind the top-down perspective of my game because that actually influences what parts of the model you can see. Like I might do different decisions if I weren't planning from this sort of view angle. And I found that tilting the strawberry a bit looked a bit better. I brought my new strawberry model into the game and my post-import script worked, so the material was assigned correctly. That's cool. So my import script is working. And I'm still kind of going for that plasticky look so that it looks kind of like toy-like. To make things look more toy-like and small, I decided to experiment with the depth of field blurring effect on the camera to kind of capture the tilt shift effect that games like Link's Awakening use for this purpose. If you do it correctly, this effect kind of tricks your brain into thinking it's looking at a miniature scene because it mimics how a camera would capture images of a small object, where if you have the small object focused in the middle of the scene, the areas at the top and bottom around that object would be blurred. I wasn't totally satisfied with the look though, and I thought I might change it later. Well, I think we'll definitely improve that blur effect later, but I didn't. Now with this all set up, I wanted to start on the basic gameplay mechanics. I started out by working on the crop scene, which would be the representation of a crop from seed to fully grown. I think I'll want to make this so I can have multiple different types of crops with different properties. So I think to do that, we can use a custom resource that will store that information, and then the crop can pull from it. This resource would contain information like the different meshes for the different stages of the crop's growth, the growth time, the name, etc. I then made it so that if you click on a plot, it will actually plant a seed in that plot. So if I click, aha, seeds. Then I wanted to make it so that if you clicked on that plot a second time, it would water the seed and then start the growth phase. If I want to visually show watering the crops when you click on it again, I need to change the color of just this one face of my planter mesh, and I'm not entirely sure the best way to do that. Because right now, basically what's happening is all of these plots are sharing the same material because that's efficient to do, but that also means when I actually update the color of material, it updates all of the different plots because they're all sharing that same shader material. So I did some research and I learned about per instance shader uniforms. Per instance uniforms, that sounds like what I want here. They let you modify specific parameters for each node using the material because they are set on a geometry instance level rather than a material level. So I set up a shader material with this, and then I wrote some tween code to update the color of the dirt over time once watered, and it worked. Oh, okay. Obviously you don't want it to turn black, but I guess this is kind of working. Now we need to make the plants grow. Then I implemented really basic crop growth after the seed is watered. So you plant seeds, you water it, it will turn into a sprout and then turn into a full strawberry. Need some animations and effects and things. I'm excited to work on that tomorrow. I think this is pretty good progress for today. I wanted to make things feel a bit more juicy and fun, so I set out to try to make some animations for the crop growth. I spent some time researching and testing different animation easing and transition curves. I set up tweens to animate the growth of the sprouts and then the crop popping out once it's ready. This looks pretty good, right? And now if I add different crops, I can just make different crop data instances with different meshes and different times, and it'll kind of all work just dynamically, which is pretty cool. Then I experimented with an infinite tween-based animation once the crop is ready and waiting to be picked up, where it just kind of scales in and out. It looks pretty good, right? I would like a transition between sprout and the strawberry, maybe like a little puff of smoke or something, like a particle thing would do it. I set up a particle system for a little explosion effect that would play once the sprout stage was finishing. That's kind of good, actually, something like that to hide the transition. And I really liked how that looked. It made the transition a lot less harsh. I then added a little pop sound when the crop has finished growing. I also briefly tried adding in an effect while the sapling is growing bigger, but decided that was too much. As fun as that is, I think that's too much. Now I really wanted to move forward with implementing a basic gameplay loop. I guess the most basic loop that I could implement is just the ability to pick up the crops once they have grown and then somehow sell them to make money, and then I can flesh that out more after. To get started on this, I realized I needed a way to determine if the player is actually close enough to something to interact with it. My initial idea for how to do this was to add an area around the player and then areas to each interactable object, and then hook up signals to detect when the player is within the area of an interactable object and change whether that object can be interacted with or not based on that. I got this working for only allowing you to actually interact and plant seeds in plots that were near the player, but I realized that I need to duplicate a lot of this logic. I might refactor this tomorrow into like a component because I actually want to do this at least for the selling bin as well. But I decided to leave it as was for the day. I then wanted to make it so that you could actually tell which plots you're going to interact with on hover. Just so you know, like here, it looks like I could click it, but I can't. And I'd like to be able to tell that without these collision shapes on. To do this, I first tried changing the color of the plots, but I didn't love how that looked. So I decided to do a different approach and just show or hide a mesh based on your mouse and where you are. Okay, so I think this is working now. Still no gameplay, but maybe tomorrow. I decided to go ahead with implementing a player interaction area component to handle checking whether objects can be interacted with based on whether the player is close by. So basically this is an area that can only be interacted with if the player is in the area. And then I want to dispatch signals from this component that the parent component, the plot or the crop, can listen to and then act on. So I hook this up to the plots and the crops as well. Seems like it's actually working. All right, I'm glad I did this. I think this will make things quite a bit easier and a lot less complex code-wise in the end. And now we can implement interaction with the crops. Then I decided to use this new functionality to add a hover state to the strawberry crops to indicate that you can pick them up. Again, I was able to use the per instance shader method to modify the emission of the material on the strawberry crops to kind of make them glow as you hover over them. I then made it so that the hover highlight tweens in rather than just going straight to highlighted to make it look a bit more smooth. Now I decided it was finally time to actually implement that basic gameplay loop I had been trying to do for a few days. I think what we need to be able to do now is actually pick up the fruit and bring it to a deposit box and then get money. I guess let's start by making it so you can pick up the crops. So I started out by implementing the functionality to add a crop mesh to the player scene when they click on a crop to pick it up. Now when I pick it up, it should be like on top of their head. I then decided it would be good to have a global inventory autoload script that would keep track of everything the player is carrying. That way I'd be able to tell anywhere in the project's code if the player has enough space in their inventory to carry a new crop. I was also planning to eventually add a basket mechanic where they'd be able to carry more than one crop at a time, so this felt like good legwork to set that up. So it lets me pick up the first one, but it does not let me pick up the next one because it can only hold one. So I guess that's working. Then I needed to add a way to actually sell the crops you've picked up. For now I added just a really simple box object to the scene that you could go to sell your crops. This again was pretty easy to get set up because I was just able to reuse my player interaction area component to detect if you're close enough to the sell box to sell your crops. So pick up the strawberry, we go to the box, we click on it, it sells it, and I now have $10. So I guess that's working. And every time I sell, it should increase my money that's printed out here. Now we have $20, $30, okay. And then I set up some UI to display the player's money in-game. Grab one and sell it. Oh look, we have $10. So I guess we have a game now. I got started a bit late this day, so I decided it'd be fun to just do some 3D modeling and get more different crops into the game. I made some concept art for some different plants and fruits I might include. So then I modeled and textured a blueberry, a watermelon, orange, corn, carrots, and they're looking pretty decent. All right, now we have strawberry, blueberry, carrots, corn, orange, watermelon. Might have pressed around the scale of these, but getting there. And then I worked on modeling the crop deposit box. Yeah, I think that looks fine for now as well. I'm happy with the results. We'll see how they look tomorrow in the game. Now for every plant I have in Blender, I need to make a new crop data type with information about that crop, and then we can incorporate them into the game. This was easy to do since I had already set up this whole system to account for different types of crops. I mean, they look decent, just some are a little bit bigger than others. I mean, we can also bring in the crop deposit box. I mean, that looks better, right? I realized for the different crops, it'd be convenient if I could just use the same seeds and just tint them different colors. So I made a grayscale version of the seed. For the time being, I set it up so that when you plant a seed, it's just a random one from all the possible types of crops. All right, so we're getting different colors here, and they should grow into different crops. That's pretty cool, right? Then you can pick it up and sell it. Wow, 100 money. The other ones are all worth 10, except the watermelon, which is worth 100 right now. It takes longer to grow. I feel like the corn is way too big, or the strawberry is too small now. Something needs to change in terms of scale. I did a little bit of modeling adjustments to make things look more properly scaled, and things were looking pretty good. All right, I think this is working, right? Like how they just go on top of your head like that, like the watermelon. Now I decided it was finally time to work on the main mechanic that had inspired me to make this game in the first place, the loot drops. Maybe I will just try to actually do some sort of rarity system and make some sort of loot drop particle effect for each different rarity, because I think that would be fun. The plan was that there would be 4 different rarities: common, rare, epic, and legendary. Each rarity would have a corresponding drop chance, and as the rarity level of a crop goes up, its sell price would also go up. So I'm thinking common will have no particle effect, rare will have a particle effect, epic will have one, and legendary obviously will have one as well. So I set up some initial base prices for crops based on their growth times. So I think when the plant gets watered, we should choose its rarity, because I plan to eventually make it so that there is a watering can with upgrades that would increase your chance of getting higher rarity crops. For determining which rarity is chosen when you water a crop, Godot actually has a really convenient method called rand weighted, which takes an array of weights and returns an index based on those weights. So I set that up to correspond to each rarity type. So this should be 65% common, 20% rare, 10% epic, and 5% legendary, and wrote some code to determine the rarity of the crop when it's watered. Then I also set up rarity multipliers for increasing the sell price of crops based on the rarity. All right, so I think this is working now. So these ones are common. If I sell it, it says it's common. This one's rare, and it's rare. So now I guess we can actually implement the particle effects for these different loot drops. I think that will be fun. This is really what inspired the whole project, so I was excited about this. First, we can probably just do like a beam of light coming out of it that maybe flickers. I first tried doing this just using a mesh instance with the particle texture and making it glow, and I tried animating that color to make it look like it was flickering, but this didn't really feel quite as dynamic as I wanted. And that's not great. I want to scroll the texture too or something. So it's been a while thinking about how to do that seamlessly, and I was thinking maybe I could make the texture loop and then animate the UV values to make it scroll, and I tried experimenting with this, but I couldn't really get it looking like I wanted. Then I realized it might actually just be easier to do this using a particle system. You know, I wonder if this would actually just better to use a particle system, because I was almost effectively trying to implement that myself. So I switched to experimenting with that and tweaking settings, and it was looking much better. That looks decent, right? Then I decided it would look cool if there was another effect kind of around the base of the crop. And this was actually really easy to implement. All I had to do was apply a texture to a quad mesh and then just animate the rotation of the mesh to make it spin. Then I set it up so that the color of the particle system would change to match the rarity level of the crop when it's instantiated. Then I set it up so that this effect would actually spawn in on crops based on their rarity when they are fully grown. This is good progress, right? We got some loot drop mechanics going on. I maybe should make the rare a little bit less crazy and then maybe save some of the effects for just the epic and legendary. So like maybe rare wouldn't have the circle, maybe epic has the circle, maybe legendary has something else as well, but we can play around with that tomorrow, I think. I spent a little bit of time just tweaking the particle effects to see if I could make them look any better. I basically ended up keeping them the same, but I added some proximity fade to make the beams more smoothly transition into the 3D models, and I also scaled up the spinning circle effect just for the watermelon. Should I make the legendary one have more particles. That's exactly what I want. I ended up settling on adding some glowing star particles around the legendary drops. Sparkles for the legendaries makes them feel a little bit more impactful. Then I decided to remove the circle effect from the rares so that the effect would actually escalate for each level. We'll leave it like this. I think these are pretty fun effects. I think we can move on to the next thing now, which I'm not sure what that is. I knew there were a lot of things left to do at this point, but I decided to start out by just improving the crop selling experience. I made it so that when you walk near the crop deposit box, the lid animates open, and when you hover over it, a highlight is added, like with the pickable crops, to indicate that you can interact with it. I also made the box squash and stretch with a tween-based animation to make it feel more fun. I ran into some issues getting this configured correctly. Okay. But I eventually got something looking decent. I then changed out the font for the money label and wrote some tween code to animate its value as it changes to make things more satisfying. I'm happy with how it looks aesthetically right now. I feel like it's pretty fun. But yeah, I'm not sure how to make it into an actual game from this point. What I'm thinking is that I could maybe implement some sort of combo system that asks you to deposit certain crops in a row, like 2 corn, 1 strawberry, and 1 orange, and you get like 100 times bonus. So that will give you some reason to plant certain crops over others, and it could also have some sort of timer on it so it expires and you have to do things quickly. So to implement this idea, I need to do a couple of things. For one, I actually need some sort of inventory system so you can actually choose which seeds you're planting. Obviously, I need some sort of shop system to buy specific seeds, and I also might want to implement the basket thing I've been talking about, where you can collect multiple fruits at once. So I decided to start out by just implementing the inventory UI for seeds. I haven't done an inventory UI before, but I'm thinking it will just look kind of like the Minecraft one with the hotbar at the bottom. We don't need a full inventory for this because we only have like 6 seeds, so probably just 6 slots or maybe 8 slots if we have tools, and then you can switch between them and click on them to choose the seed you actively have selected. So I started mocking out this hotbar UI. For setting up the icons for the UI, I decided I would use a viewport to display the 3D model I wanted as the icon, and then just display that in a 2D texture in the hotbar. This is kind of a cool system because it allows you to put whatever you want in that viewport and use it as an icon, and you can update it whenever you want. All right, getting somewhere here. By the end of the day, I had it so that I would display all of the seeds that were in the player's inventory and the number of seeds as well. But there wasn't actually any functionality yet. So now it should have the correct numbers now. And we're making some progress here, but I think maybe at this point I should just come back and finish this inventory system up tomorrow because I feel like I'm making things pretty messy right now, so probably better to come back. I wasn't totally satisfied with how I was setting up this inventory and inventory UI structure, so I did some thinking and just diagramming to figure out the best way forward. I've been taking some notes on what's going on, and I think I might be overcomplicating things, but maybe that's fine for now. We have a lot of different classes going on here for different parts of the inventory, and yeah, let's just get this working. Figuring out how all the data should be stored and reflected in the UI and then sent to the player was a bit tricky, and I eventually got something working. I wasn't still 100% satisfied with it, but I felt like it was fine enough for this project. Okay, kind of working, right? So if I pick that, okay, it's planting blueberry seeds, pick that. Planting carrots, pick that. Planting strawberries. All right, I think we almost have this working. Now I want to think about how to add in a watering can and also a basket that will allow you to pick up multiple crops at once. I spent some time modeling a basket and then a watering can in Blender, and then I brought them into the game. All right, so that looks pretty good, right? It looks like a watering can, and we also have this basket. So I'm excited to try to actually implement these now into the toolbar, but it's getting a bit late now, so I think that's where I'll leave it for today, but we made some good progress. Now what I should do is actually implement these 2 tools, the watering can and the basket. I kind of written this inventory code as if you could only carry seeds, so I need to think about how to refactor that. I first had to spend some time refactoring the inventory UI code to be able to handle tools as well as seeds. All right, that's good. It's time to get these tools hooked up so that it doesn't crash when I click on them. We got them spawning here. Then I made it so that you can only actually water crops if you have the watering can equipped. So if we plant the seeds here, we can water them if we have the watering can equipped, but we can't if we have something else equipped. It's beginning to feel more like a real game, I guess, other than the watering can being located inside your body right now. I then positioned the watering can and basket models in the player scene, positioned as I wanted them to show up, and then I could just hide or show them based on whether the tool was equipped. Then I started working on the basket implementation. Basically what's going to happen is that if you have space in the basket, which can be upgraded, but let's say you start out, you have 4 spaces, you can pick up a fruit and it'll go into the basket instead of just like onto your head like that. And then when you click on the deposit box with a basket equipped, it will deposit all of the fruits in your basket instead of just one. And then we can do a combo system based on that to make things more interesting. I decided to keep the logic here just within the inventory code because it was basically just an extension of the inventory. I got the basic logic for this working, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we sell them. I think this is working. And then I started thinking about how to actually update the visual of the basket to indicate what it's holding. I made the basket its own scene so that I could add logic to it and have it listen to signals from the inventory when it's updated. So I think to place the different crops in the basket, if I want to make it visual, I might want to think about how to subdivide the basket area into different shapes based on the number of crops and kind of have that work dynamically. So I think this will be a little bit tricky to figure out, so maybe I'll just do it tomorrow. I wrote some code to position and scale the relevant crop models within the basket so that they would all fit within a rectangular surface placed inside the top of the basket. For this, I just used a plain mesh, and that would give me information on where I could actually place things. I started out with just getting all the crops to fit in one row within the basket. I guess it's working. But I should probably make it have multiple rows instead of just one row, and that might make it look a little bit better too. Then I refactored the code to add in columns as well to give the crops more space. And yeah, this took a while, but I really like how it looks. All right, that seems to be working. Then I experimented with some different animations for the crops entering the basket. All right, I think that looks pretty good. And then I decided to actually add in the rarity effects as well to the crops that you're carrying, so you know exactly what you're holding. This game is getting pretty polished for not really having much gameplay. I realized it would be nice if the basket icon in the inventory actually reflected the crops you're holding. Since all of the icons in the toolbar are actually just 2D representations of a 3D scene, I was actually able to just create another instance of the basket scene, and since it would listen to events from the inventory, like the one on the player's head did, it would just automatically update. That's kind of cool, isn't it? You can see them going in. Then I spent some time just looking for and adding a bunch of sound effects. I added one for when you deposit crops and the money goes up, for the crop box lid opening, for planting, picking, and watering crops. I set up some tooltips on the hotbar to tell you what you're actually hovering over. Then I finally started working on a seed shop UI so that you can actually buy more seeds once you run out. Kind of thinking, you know, just like some simple UI like this, and maybe some little tiny shopkeepers that are cute that you just click on and then it'll bring up the shop menus. I spent some time mocking up a UI until I figured out something I liked. I mean, it's not terrible looking, right? We just need to actually make it work. Then I worked on adding the functionality to actually add seeds to your inventory as you buy them. If you buy corn, oh, look at that. It's working. And also subtract money and also only let you actually buy seeds if you have enough money. Once I got that working, I went into Blender and tried modeling a shopkeeper. Then I modeled a little wooden sign that the shopkeeper could have next to them to indicate what they're selling. I added this into the game and positioned a flattened seed model on the sign. It made it so that when you click on the shopkeeper, it opens up the seed shop, and the shopkeeper also tweens in size and hover to indicate interaction. That's good for today. I was feeling like I really needed to set an actual deadline for this project, otherwise I would just keep working on it forever. It's always so hard to know when to say the project is done because obviously it's not a full game and I'm only spending a couple of weeks on the project. But for me, this is about the learning experience of making something new and figuring out different parts of making a game. So I think we're almost there. The plan now is to spend the next 3 days, including today, just finishing up this project, and we'll just call it then wherever it is, hopefully. I had a big list of things I still wanted to implement before that point. I decided to start by actually trying to implement that bonus system I had thought about earlier because I thought it would make it feel more like a real game with actual decisions to make and goals to aim for. My thought is that I can kind of just add a sign that's next to the deposit box that will have the current combo on it, which would just be like 2 carrots, 1 blueberry. And if you deposit a basket with that exact combo in it, you'll get the amount it would normally sell for multiplied by some combo bonus amount. And as you upgrade your basket and carry more things, there can be more things in the combo, and that will increase the multiplier even more. So you can get really crazy huge numbers from doing this. So I modified the shopkeeper sign to use for the bonus. Then I wrote some code to pick random crops up to the max number the player can currently carry in their basket as the current bonus, and then display the models for those crops below the sign. Okay, so I think this is working. We'll just put 2 random crops on the sign. Obviously, we need to get them on the surface of the sign instead, but that's a good start. Let's think about how to display these on the sign. I ended up implementing a very similar system to how the basket was working to dynamically arrange the crops on the sign depending on how many there are. I had some issues here figuring out why certain crops weren't positioning on the sign correctly. I don't know why it's so low. Why is y negative 0.75? And I eventually realized it was due to an incorrect origin point set in Blender for the mesh. So the problem was I didn't have the origin set correctly in Blender. Then I made it so that if you fulfill the bonus, it gives you a large multiplier on the crops you're depositing, and decided to make the bonus multiplier depend on the number of crops that are required. So now it should show what the actual bonus is here, which depends on the number of things. I then realized it would be more interesting if there was actually a timer on the bonus. I feel like I want a timer, because otherwise you can just take your sweet time doing this, which doesn't feel right. So I implemented that, and with all of this, it was definitely starting to feel more like a real game. All right, so I think this makes it feel more like a game. I don't know, there's so many things I could add to this. There's like a never-ending list of things I could add, but I'm going to have to end it somewhere with this. So let's make maybe the upgrade UI so that I can upgrade the basket and the watering can. The watering can will make it more likely to get rares and legendaries and epics, and the basket will just make it so that you can get more items in your basket. Probably start out with 2 and then go up from there. Then I started mocking up the upgrade UI for tool upgrades. All right, so just getting this basically set up, but I'm feeling a bit tired suddenly. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I should come back to this tomorrow. I was realizing though that there's actually some strategy in the game now, which I was happy to feel. I continued working on the upgrade UI. So we need the tool icon, maybe just like we have the upgrade level and then like a upgrade button with a cost. I decided it was fun for the icons for the tools to actually make them spin around in the icon because I could do that with the way things were set up. So I did that. For the watering can, I wanted the upgrades to increase the chances of getting rarer crops. So I set up different rarity weights for all of the possible levels of the watering can. We'll have to tweak these percentages, but basically this will make it so that when you upgrade, you'll just get higher and higher chances of getting rares, epics, and legendaries instead of commons. And at the highest level, you'll get 0 commons. So that should be fun. When you fully upgraded the watering can, it was fun to see how every single drop would be glowing. I then made it so that basket upgrades would increase the number of crops you can carry. I added the shop to the game just by copying the other seed shopkeeper for now. Okay, I was going to make these different, but now this opens the upgrades, this opens the seed shop. And then set out to model a player character, trying to think of something that kind of could stay in the spirit of the current character, meaning just like a cylinder. And I was feeling like a meerkat could do that. So maybe we'll make a really simplified, just like tubular meerkat. Like look at that. It's just like a little tube. This modeling was quite a struggle. I feel like this is turning more into a like mole. But that's fine. So we have a mouse, meerkat, mole. If you look underneath, there's secretly a smile. But I came up with something and I brought it into Godot. I also tweaked the seed shopkeeper a little bit to try to make it more cute, but I'm not sure I succeeded. I then modified that shopkeeper to make a slightly different looking other shopkeeper for the upgrade shop and brought that into the game and changed the sign as well. So you can just like leave and I think eventually fall off the map. What happens if you do that? Goodbye. I could add a fence around the game, or I could just leave that in. If you choose to jump off the map, maybe that's your fault. But you know, this is pretty cute, right? I wish I was a little bit better at character modeling though, but that will come with practice. My goal was for this to be the final day of development. All right, so we have a bunch of things to do, but we do have pretty much a full game now here. I first decided I wanted to actually animate the player character to make it look a bit more fun as it moved. I ran into some bugs getting this rotation working correctly. It's like kids ice skating. But I eventually got it working. I felt that now that you can see the back of the character, it really felt like it needed a tail. Maybe it needs a tail, actually, since you can turn around. So I spent way too long trying to model a tail for the character in Blender. I don't know if the tail is good, and I spent like an hour making this tail, but I guess we can leave it. I also spent some time getting the character to turn smoothly instead of just snapping to the new direction. I made it so that the character moves up slightly in the Y direction when it walks over the plots so that it doesn't clip through them as much. I then added a squash and stretch animation on the character and made it play when the character is moving. And I added a slower, less exaggerated version of this for just an idle animation. I also adjusted some environmental lighting settings to make things look a bit better. I noticed that with my scaling-based animations, the specular lighting highlights had an annoying jumping effect, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Like, why are the lighting calculations changing so much? Interesting, so without the specular reflections, things actually look better. I'm guessing the problem is I need to actually animate the rig of model instead of actually animating the scale of the mesh non-uniformly, because I'm assuming that's affecting the normal calculations and lighting and making things weird. But this is a lot quicker to get working for right now, so I guess I'll just leave it and I can fix it sometime in the future. Then I was playing the game and I realized it was basically impossible to fulfill the larger bonuses once you have your basket upgraded. To grow that many things, even if we have all the seeds, definitely need more time. So I needed to address that. So I made the bonus timer scale based on the number of crops required. I guess we should add an end goal maybe and just like have you win the game. My thought is that you just win the game when you've upgraded everything and also you have 100,000 money. Maybe we can just set that up and have kind of like a explosion at the end or something when you win and some text that shows up in the UI. So I set it up so that it would tell the player the goal when you start the game. Then I wanted to add a celebratory effect when you actually complete the goals. So I set up a particle system that's kind of like confetti that would explode when you complete the goals and also some congratulatory text. And I also added a celebratory sound effect. So now it was the end of the day and I knew it was supposed to be my final day. I am so close to getting this to a done state, but it's getting kind of late. So I think I'll just come back tomorrow morning, just add a couple small finishing touches, a couple more sound effects, maybe some like bushes around the edges or something like that. And then we'll be done because I need to start the next project. So the plan for today is to actually finish up this project and call it done by the end of the day. So I'm just playing through the game and I'm realizing one thing that's tricky is once you get to these higher levels and you need to fill these bonuses, it's actually hard to keep track of what you've already picked up. I could maybe like change the colors of things on the sign based on what they've picked up. I wrote some code to just change the emission color of the crops on the sign as they are picked up to let you know that they're already in your basket. This worked pretty well. Then I spent a while just finding and adding some more sound effects for purchasing seeds, upgrading tools, and also when you click on a crop to pick it up, but your basket's already full, so you can't. I briefly considered here trying to write a guitar soundtrack for the game before realizing here that I really only know how to write metal music, so that didn't really feel fitting. I don't know if I can really write an ambient farming soundtrack. I just want to finish this today, so we'll save the writing music for another project. I then added a walking sound for when the player is moving, and I also added some particles that spawn as the player walks to indicate some dirt getting kicked up. Okay, this is fine. That wasn't even on my list of things to do. It's very easy to keep adding things to games. I made this ground plane like forever ago. What does this even look like? Is that better with a brighter color? It does seem a little more vibrant this way. Probably good. I added a special sound effect for when a legendary crop spawns, which makes it feel a lot more satisfying. Okay, that's kind of fun. I'm glad I added that. Look at how many rares there are. It is fun once you get all the upgrades. At this point, I was feeling like the scene was looking a little boring though outside of your crops, so I decided it would be good if I modeled some decoration. I modeled some grass and trees to place around the scene. I spent a while arranging these models in the scene and rotating and scaling them for variety as I placed them. With this, things were really coming together. Yeah, you know, this is looking good. I like this. This is really cute. It really feels like kind of an actual game now. So one last idea I had was to actually show you at the end how long it took you to become the best farmer. So let me just see if I can implement that really fast. So I set that up and set it so it would display in the final congratulatory text. So I think the main thing left to do here is actually just balance the game, which I'm not really sure how to do. I think I should make the upgrade for the watering can a little bit more powerful, because right now it's not that noticeable. So I spent a bit tweaking these drop rates to make the upgrades feel a lot more impactful. Let me just play through it one more time and see how it feels, but I think this is it, finally. And then I played through the whole game one more time to test it out. Okay. That only took me 6 minutes, so I guess that's my new record. If you play the game, let me know what your time is. And then I finally decided that I was done. So I think I'm done. This is probably my most complete game so far, I guess, other than maybe my game jam game I did in the fall. This is like a full experience and I can totally see this turning into an actual game. So I'm quite happy with this and I think I learned a lot. I definitely thought this was going to be a short project, but of course it was a lot longer than I was expecting. I can never really keep things short, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I hope you like it as well. So this is the final game and I am quite happy with how it turned out. I spent quite a bit of time on this project, a lot more than I was initially thinking, which is kind of what always happens. But if I had more time, there's still obviously a lot more I would add to this to make it more of a real full game. But I think it is fun as it is, as well as a little demo of this idea. I'm particularly happy with the visual aesthetic of the game. I think it's really cute and fun. And I also really love the loot drop effects I implemented as well. If you'd like to try out the game yourself, I have it up on itch.io and it's linked in the description. Let me know in the comments how long it takes you to become the best farmer. Also, if you're interested in supporting the channel and you'd also like access to the source code and assets I made for this game and all of my past projects as well, I have a Patreon page I'll have linked in the description. Thank you so much to everyone who's already been supporting me over there. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.